How you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We're starting Week 9 here today. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, also, by the way. We're starting Week 9 off tonight with a pretty interesting game here in the NFL. The Texans are traveling over across the country over by where I live and are taking on the New York Jets. That'll be the first thing we talk about on today's show, going over the preview and what we can look forward to in tonight's game. Also on today's show, we'll be looking at the game picks for the weekend slate, looking at the first half of games in today's show, and we'll finish it off tomorrow with the second half. Also, taking a look at the reports around the Pittsburgh Steelers, I thought it was interesting how they sort of identified 3 targets to keep an eye on that could be traded to Pittsburgh as they continue to look for a wide receiver, and some more trade talk as well down the line, while also talking about the Stephon Diggs injury that we haven't gotten a chance to talk about yet. So all of that is coming up on today's show. And before we get started, as usual, I'd like to remind you guys, if you guys have any questions or comments you'd like to make on today's show, please don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and your insights. And just whether you have a quick question, comment, opinion, or anything like that, please don't hesitate to do so and drop it in the chat box. And also, that's one thing, right? But to make it absolutely guaranteed that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's a new way to go about that now, just by using the new Super Chat feature available to you guys. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box, and this way it'll send in your Super Chat. I'll be able to read it and, feature it on the show and just take the conversation from there. It's a fantastic way to not only be on the show, but feature and, help our channel out as well. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, we appreciate it whenever you guys are able to do that. Get involved with the show each and every opportunity you get here when we go live. So that is that, and now we can start talking about some football, because we're going to start Week 9. The season is just flying by. I feel like already we're in Week 9, past the halfway point, and it all starts off again tonight. The Jets are hosting the Houston Texans tonight back in Jet Life for the start of Week 9. Like I said, Houston comes into this game at 6-2, first in the AFC South, while the Jets are close to rock bottom, as close as you can get to rock bottom for this season, right? Because they are 2-6 and they're on a 5-game losing streak as well. The Jets also, with that 2-6 record, are tied for last place in the AFC East. And, looking at their schedule, it's funny enough how their last win came on a Thursday Night Football about 42 days ago when they beat the Patriots 24-3 in week 3, I believe, week 4, when they took on the Patriots there. Around that time, 42 days ago. I think it was September 19th, around then. So, yeah, it's been a long time, over a month and about a month and a half now since the Jets last tasted victory, and they've changed a lot of things, right? Jeff Ulbrich now as the interim head coach. He's still looking for his first win. Todd Downing is the offensive coordinator. Devontae Adams came over. Hassan Reddick came back, and still all of that, and still no wins to show for it. At least they're trying, right? They've done everything possible to really show everyone that they're going all in, but it hasn't turned out to the results they would have hoped for as of yet. And on the other hand, we have the Houston Texans. They're looking for their 5th win in their last 6 games. These teams actually met last year in New York as well, where the Jets won 30-6 with Zach Wilson, and CJ Stroud actually left that game, unfortunately, with a concussion. So he comes back here and tries to get some retribution from last season, where this was one of the losses for the Houston Texans. And just looking at each one of these teams, the Texans, starting off with them, they're coming off of a win last week, a big divisional game against the Colts. Another tight contest between division opponents, but the Colts were able to win. They sweep the Colts, or the Texans were able to win and sweep the Colts, and now That was great and all. They took firm position of the AFC South, but they did lose Stephon Diggs in the meantime, with a torn ACL now after we got that confirmation. It only adds to the injury woes that the Texans are suffering from. Obviously, Nico being the biggest one, but he is coming back, right? He is only on the IR. He's expected to come back, I believe, in next week or in a couple weeks. It shouldn't be too long. He's already been out for a couple weeks. So Nico is going to come back, obviously, but not the same for Stephon Diggs. And like I mentioned, they're not only dealing with Stephon and Nico, but in tonight's game, we're not going to see Jimmy Ward again. We're not going to see their linebacker, Al-Shaair, or the running back, Dameon Pierce. They're all out of tonight's game. Jimmy Ward dealing with a groin, Al-Shaair dealing with a knee, and Dameon Pierce also dealing with a groin injury as well. Those guys are going to continue to be out. So we're expected to see a lot of, not new faces, but at least young wide receivers on this Houston Texans team that are getting a good opportunity now. Tank Dell, he's probably the presumed number one, right, just off of last year, and being the most prominent one out of all of them. John Mechie is another one that's interesting that I thought he would be involved in more of the trade talks, but it looks like now, certainly, the Texans are going to need him. Xavier Hutchinson also, Robert Woods is another name. All of those guys I'm sure are going to feature a lot tonight. But the main thing for me, for this Texans team, as I do expect them to kind of shift a little bit more to a run-heavy, run-oriented sort of offense with Joe Mixon, because he's been fantastic this year. He missed a lot of time with that ankle injury, but when he's been out there, it feels like he's just torching each and every team that he plays. So maybe start running the show through him could be a different way to go about it, not just using these other wide receivers if per se they're not ready, or they're very young, right? You have an experienced running back in Joe Mixon who has just been killing it. Why not maybe turn the focus over to him? And also the offensive line, with the discussion of passing still or running the ball. The pass blocking hasn't necessarily been great for the Texans. That's one of their critiques so far on the year. So, again, it sounds like running the ball could be the way to go tonight if I was in charge of the Texans. But at 6-2, they might not need too much of my help. Now, on the other hand, the Jets, they might benefit from some advice, right? Because they're 2-6, and they're also dealing with some injuries in tonight's game. Elijah Vera Tucker, one of their guards, is not playing. He's going to be out with an ankle injury. Ashton Davis, he's going to be out with a concussion on a short week. Doesn't give enough time to clear the protocol. And Alan Lazard is the biggest one. He's going to be out of this game with a chest injury. And, with the offense struggling, losing, if you're Aaron Rodgers, one of your most trusted weapons, is going to switch some things up. So that's going to be an interesting blow to see how they work around. Maybe we see the real Davante Adams show up tonight, and we're probably going to see more of Garrett Wilson. He's been more involved, as you would. He almost leads the league in catches, and I think he leads the league in targets so far. So he's going to continue to be involved with their play calling. So overall, just the season for the Jets, just very disappointing because of all the changes, the play callers, Davante Adams, the head coach, like I mentioned before. But, the biggest disappointment has been Rodgers, his own individual struggles, and it just feels like also, as much as it is Aaron Rodgers, this defense, who it just felt like that was the most assured thing about this team going into this year, hasn't really lived up to the bill. Their defense against the run is only 24th in the NFL. It's 17th. In the NFL currently. They have the 24th ranked offense, the 30th ranked rushing offense, and the 25th scoring offense so far. Their turnover margin also is at a -3, and for comparison, the Texans are at a +4. So, yeah, it seems like you don't want this to be the whole season, obviously. You just want to say that they're in a bit of a rut. So, it would start tonight. If they go to 2-7, it's going to be as good as over, in my opinion, for the Jets, if it isn't already. So, yeah, it makes tonight's game even more important. And looking at tonight's game and what could decide it, the matchups in this game are super, super fascinating, because I have one of the biggest ones is that this new look wide receivers wide receiver room for the Texans, right, going up against the Jets secondary. Who, draws the matchup against Sauce Gardner? Who sees, the most success? Are we going to get surprised by one of these young guys, taking over, or is it going to be Tank Dell? Sauce Gardner doesn't usually travel too much, so we'll see who draws that matchup and how successful they'll be with that. Also, maybe if the Jets have a lot of success, maybe the absences of Nico and Diggs draw more attention to this issue, where maybe the Texans do some late shopping and try to trade for one with the last couple of days here in the deadline. And another matchup I have on here is the Jets offensive line against Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. The Texans defense has been very good in terms of getting to the quarterback. They rank third in the NFL in sacks with 27, and Rodgers has been sacked already 18 times, which is top 10 most in the NFL. So for that veteran group, now they're going to be down Elijah Vera Tucker and potentially Morgan Moses, but I think he'll play. But even still, not great at pass protecting. They give up a lot of sacks, and now against these two menace pass rushers, it is something that I am leaning towards the Houston defense, but if the Jets can work around that and try to maneuver around that, that'll be huge. And lastly, the matchup I'm looking most forward to is going to be the wide receivers for the Jets going up against the corners for the Houston Texans. Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, now that we know Allen Lazard's not playing, going up against Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter, the rookie cornerback. I love this matchup because Stingley is one of the great young defensive backs, not talked about enough, but he is really, really good. And Kamari Lassiter, he's been impressing a lot of people as well. He's starting right away as a rookie, so he's doing some things right. I think he played for, I think he went to school at Georgia. So if you guys are more college fans, you'd see his transition from Georgia into the pros. And he's been playing out of his mind. So Garrett Wilson, he's been doing pretty successful. He's targeted a lot. So how much do they, move him around? How much is he going to be on Derek Stingley? Who draws the, the presumed easier matchup on the rookie? And how successful they are with that. It's going to be awesome to see one duo going up against the other duo. I'm really looking forward to that. But finally, my predictions. While the Texans might be battered and a little bit beaten down, I'm going to go with them. I still believe they have enough to win this game. Their defense is also just very good. The run game not really being there for the Jets, which is a shame for Breece Hall. But it hasn't really gotten going or overwhelmed too many teams. So with that being the case, I think the Texans could get out to an early lead. The Jets start throwing it a lot more than they run it like they usually do. And then they become one-dimensional. And when you do that, you open the door for these two guys, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, to come after you. And, Aaron Rodgers isn't running away from too many guys. So I feel like that'll just overwhelm the Jets tonight. I'm going to go with the Texans to win their fifth game in six total games recently and go to 7-2. And unfortunately for the Jets, probably means their season is over unless they completely surprise me. I'm just leaning towards the Texans in tonight's game. So that's the preview to tonight's game that is set to kick off in about an hour and a half or so, give or take. While we wait for that, we're going to head into our next break, and when we return, we got part one of our Week 9 game picks. We got 6 games here that we're going to go over, give the reasons for why I'm picking one or the other, and just go from there. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to get into our usual weekly game picks that we do each and every week, right? Heading towards the weekend. On Thursdays and Fridays, we usually do the game picks, going through each matchup, talking about it, giving my reasons why I'm picking one or the other. And this week, obviously no different. There's a lot of interesting matchups as well, a couple tricky ones that I kind of got stumped on picking them. So I'll show you guys what I mean by that, right? Looking at the first 6 games here, we did the Packers and the Lions yesterday, so that's why I don't have them on here. But starting off with the left side, as always, the top left-hand corner, the Dolphins are playing the Buffalo Bills once again, right? A matchup where potentially, going back to their first game, maybe based on how it ended, right? We weren't expecting Tua to probably play in their comeback game, their rematch game for the second time around. But unfortunately, we were wrong about that. Tua was able to come back onto the field. Through all the speculations, the doubts, the worries by some, he was back out there, and he looked pretty good. He looked pretty good for coming back, and everybody having all these worries about him. He was very adamant about coming back, and the offense was clicking right away for the Dolphins in their last game. They scored the most amount of points in their last game with Tua back. While he was away, they were ranked dead last in points per game at around 14 points per game. So you see that impact right away. And in their last matchup, obviously we remember Tua suffering that concussion. And, it just feels like it's going to be some weird vibes around this game. I don't know why. I just feel like you can't help but not think about it. And I'm not even playing, right? Could you imagine the players going out there? I'm sure they're not thinking about, protecting Tua or anything like that. But, there's always that weird sensation I would have to imagine. So with that, looking at their last games, I mentioned Tua coming back. The offense looked pretty well, but they still lost against Arizona in pretty crippling way. Just last second field goal, obviously, with their defense not being able to hold up. Whereas the Buffalo Bills, they went across the country and destroyed the Seahawks on their home field, 31-10. And since their last matchup, the Bills only got better by adding Amari Cooper. So with that included into this equation now, the Miami Dolphins look better with Tua back in there. Their defense is in the upper third in terms of rankings and statistics, but even still, I'm going to go with the Bills because I don't know what I'm getting with this Dolphins team. The Bills, it just feels like they have their number. You always get those matchups, right, where it just feels like whatever you may do, just recently from my experience, like the Patriots and the Steelers, while Tom Brady was there, it just felt like, there was always something that, the Patriots were just gonna win. It was something about that matchup with Bill, Tom, and everything like that, other than them being great, right? But, even when you thought one team had their best chance to win, there was always something, right, that popped up. So that's the sense of feeling with the Dolphins and the Bills. The Bills have won their last 5 games. So this time being in Buffalo, I think it'll resemble their first matchup, and I think the Bills will handle this one pretty easily. Then moving just down one row here, we got the Denver Broncos against the Baltimore Ravens. Oddly enough, both of these teams have the exact same record. 5-3 for the Broncos, 5-3 for the Ravens. You probably would have never guessed that, obviously, with Russell leaving, them drafting a rookie. A lot of doubt around the Broncos so far, and look at them now, right? Same record as one of the best teams in the NFL. But, of course, the schedules have been very different. The Broncos will play the Chiefs, but the Ravens have played the Chiefs, the Bengals. They've played the Cowboys. I'm trying to think of any other tough matchups. They had a great game with the Bengals, but that's also divisional. But, even still, just talking more about the Broncos, right? And their opponents, right? They've played some pretty good ones, the Steelers, the Seahawks, and the Chargers, all not bad teams. But, the Broncos lost to all three of those teams, right? Those are all three of their losses. So while they've played some decent teams, they've lost to all of them. So, there's a little bit of give and take there. Their biggest win, the most impressive one, was against Tampa Bay, down in Tampa where they beat them 26-7. So, this Broncos team has something to them, right? They're not just benefiting off of a easy schedule. They are able to win by good merit of their own. Their defense is playing very well. It complements their offense, which might not be 100% complete yet, right? Because they're just starting this thing with Bo Nix. And, Josh Reynolds, unfortunately, had that off-the-field issue where he was involved in a shooting. So he's not going to be able to play. But even still, they've been able to just chug along and play pretty decently. Again, they're playing pretty well, complimentary football. Bo Nix looks like he's improving each and every time he's out there. So I've heard some people call this sort of a upset alert, trap game sort of scenario for the Ravens, especially with the Ravens, the way that they looked last week against the Browns, losing to a struggling, very depleted Browns team. No Amari Cooper, Jameis Winston going back in there, and still this Ravens defense could not stand up to the challenge. And I specify their defense because they are bottom 3 right now in terms of defending the pass. Defending the pass has not been by any means their strong suit. And they are able to generate some pressure, but I don't know what it is about their secondary, the concepts that they run, or the personnel. It hasn't looked the same as years past. So obviously still something they have to work with. This will be the first game, presumably, for Deontay Johnson since making that trade. So that'll be exciting. And I do acknowledge the Broncos as a good team. I think they are a better than just okay team. They're not like the Giants or the Raiders, right, that I'm just looking at here. They're in that level with like the Chargers or who am I, like the Steelers. I would class them as the same, I would say. So they're in that group, but even still, if this game was in Denver, I might be lenient to making a surprise pick here, but I'm going to go with the Ravens. I think they bounce back. They are true contenders, and true contenders wouldn't lose the game like this. For as good as their defense is, I think they should have enough, with the addition of Deontay Johnson, to just pull out the win here against the rookie quarterback as well. I like the Ravens in this one. Then, going from one AFC North team, one AFC North against AFC West matchup, we go to another one just below that in the Chargers, traveling to Cleveland to take on the Browns. The Jameis Winston show now, right? This is Jameis Winston's show, his ship that he is sailing now with Deshaun Watson on the shelf with a ruptured Achilles. Amari Cooper's now gone. Every sort of success that they will have is going to run through Jameis and Nick Chubb also, right? He's still there. And the Browns had an awesome win last week, obviously like we just talked about against the Ravens. To shock everyone, the offense to look as crisp and as explosive as it did. It's great for Jameis Winston, right, because he was playing, but also we can't forget about Ken Dorsey. He was given the play calling duties over from Kevin Stefanski, and him, just like Jameis Winston, I think both aced their test just right away, especially going up against the Ravens. It doesn't get harder than that to at least compete with and go point for point for. So great for both of them to get that done. And they're playing with house money. They have nothing to lose really because everyone's already written them off. So they're always a tricky team now for anybody because they literally are playing with no fear. Like, they have nothing to lose. If they somehow go on a run here, that's great because the expectations are already off them. So they're always a tricky team, especially for a Chargers team right now that's sitting in a playoff spot. They're 4-3. They're coming off of a blowout win over the Saints. Lad McConkey having his breakout game as a rookie. Will that continue on into this game? These two are probably the toughest ones I had to pick because it involves some teams that I don't really know yet what I'm going to get. Sometimes the offense isn't there. Both like the Chargers, the Browns, the Broncos all have good defenses, but their offenses are a little just like hit or miss. So in this matchup, even with the Browns and the Chargers, both have solid defenses. Their offenses also stack up pretty similarly, but it's in Cleveland too. You know what? I might. Oh my God! I almost want to go Joe Buck. Chargers got it. I picked the Chargers, but the more I look at this matchup, I think like the Browns could sneak one away again. It's in Cleveland. Otani, Dodgers champions, yeah. The Giants blew it. I'm glad I don't really follow baseball because I would be a Yankees fan, and that would have been rough to watch. So I'm gonna go with the Chargers. I'm going with you, Joe Buck. I'm gonna stick with my pick, but this could go either way. So that's one. Looking at this other side of the columns, the Saints and the Cardinals. Derek Carr is expected to return after 3 weeks of missing, action. You right. Yeah, I mean, like, it's tough just because, like, the Browns are playing with nothing, right? There's nothing, no pressure or anything like that, but I'm going to go with your pick. I'm going to go with the Chargers. But, the Saints and the Carolina Panthers, it's two disappointing teams, same division. The Saints could have been a lot better, but, with the injury to Derek Carr, it really destroyed their season. They're on a 6-game losing streak right now. And Bryce Young is expected to play for the Panthers also after Andy Dalton is cleared, which I don't really understand at all. They're just going to throw Bryce Young back in there and then probably bench him again once Andy Dalton is fully healthy, which, is almost backwards for me because Bryce is the presumed future, but they're just going to risk him anyway. So with that, I'm going to take the Saints. I think Derek Carr being in there should settle more things down for them, and they'll end their 6-game losing streak definitely against the Panthers with Derek Carr back. And also this matchup, a little tricky as well with the Raiders and the Bengals. Joe Burrow said this is a must-win game, so it's in Cincinnati. The Raiders played a pretty surprisingly close game with the Chiefs, though, last week. I didn't expect that at all. And Cincinnati kind of went ghost in the second half of the game against Philadelphia, but the Eagles are not the Raiders, or I should say the Raiders aren't the Eagles. Just two completely different rosters and whatnot. The Bengals need this game more. I said last week, if the Raiders were to lose last week, their season would be over. So a little bit like the Browns makes them dangerous because they're not playing for anything, but I think the Bengals will get their stuff together and win this game. They need to win a lot of games going forward, so they can't lose this game and think they're going to make the playoffs. So give me Joe Burrow, give me Jamar Chase. They have enough to win this game. And lastly here, the Commanders and the Giants, two teams going in completely different directions. The first time, was memorable because Washington got their first win of the season. Also the first win for Jaden Daniels in a game where they didn't score a single touchdown, and instead they kicked 7 field goals. And Malik Neighbors had a crazy game that week, but he had one bad drop that ended up being costly. The Commanders won by 3 points, and now the Commanders are rolling, right? They're one of the hottest teams. They're America's team, it feels like, right? Like, everybody wants to see the Commanders win. They love seeing the Commanders be good again after, I don't even remember how long it was since they were good. So everyone's really just fallen in love with Jaden, with Washington. And also, for those that don't know, the Giants are pretty bad at home. And overall, the Giants have just been on a 3-game losing streak. And Daniel Jones in particular plays a lot worse at home. So with all that in mind, I'm going to take Washington again. They're just rolling right now, and they're a better team, quite frankly, than the Giants. Though I was impressed by Tyrone Tracy. I'll give him a shout out just because he did impress me last week against the Steelers, but it's an easy one. The Commanders are just better, so I'm going to go with the Commanders. There's not going to be any surprises there. So those are all the games just in this first half. I'll bring the second half to you guys tomorrow, and we'll conclude that in tomorrow's show, obviously. But for right now, we're going to take a break, and when we return, we're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, because reportedly they've identified 3 targets that they're really interested in trading for with the deadline coming up next Tuesday. We're going to talk about who they are, which one would I prefer, and just what are the chances the Steelers end up getting one of them. So we'll be right back after this short break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back, guys, to the Chip Shot Football Podcast here on October 31st. Happy Halloween. I forgot to mention that. The last day in October. You know what's weird today over where I live? Just side note. It was like 80 degrees here. And that's not normal here where I live in New Jersey. So, last day of October heading into November. Crazy weather that we're having. So, it was just odd to me that happened today. So, I had to bring it up before we get to talking about the Steelers here a little bit. The Steelers are in an interesting situation, right? Because this year, the 2024 Steelers, right, they're on their bye week this week, so they don't really have to focus on anything other than trade talks, right? Because they're sitting in first place in the AFC North. They're in a spot where they're 6-2, when a lot of people pick them at best to be in third place or even last place in this division. Again, just surprising a lot of people like they usually do. Mike Tomlin, like he usually does, surprising a lot of people, and they find themselves in first place here halfway through the year, now in their bye week. And the quarterback question, the speculation and everything like that couldn't have worked out any better. Honestly, you look at Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, you got to see a little bit of both of them, right? Justin starting out the year because Russ was hurt, and you got to see where Justin was at, right? This was always going to be a longer-term project just based on what he was coming off of with the Bears. You got to see a little bit of him, be impressed by his athleticism and things like that, but clearly he still has some mechanical, quarterback-oriented, specific things to work out for. So you got the opportunity to move on to Russell Wilson over the last couple weeks, and it couldn't have worked out better. And you look at them on the sideline, they look like best friends and everything like that. That's the ideal scenario, right? You see a little bit of both, and there's no animosity. So that also has worked out better for them. And with Russ, this Steelers team is averaging at least 30 points per game over 2 games. I do acknowledge that, but it's something very rare, because the Steelers, with the recent quarterbacks that they had, last year with Kenny, Mitch, and Mason, it hasn't been like that at all. They've been averaging like 17, 18 points per game, putting a lot more pressure on their defense, but now they're getting a bit more support from this offense that, you look at a team averaging 30 points per game, you're thinking that they have this high-powered offense, but the first half of the year, you would admit that was the easier part for the Steelers' schedule. The second half of the season is going to be ugly, is going to be battering, bruising. It's going to be a fight in all these games because they have all their divisional games plus games against the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Washington Commanders. It's going to get a lot tougher for this Steelers team, and it's great that they're playing very well right now, but the real test comes after this bye week. So everything's been good. The Steelers need to be better, though, because they're going to be tested a lot more, and the wide receiver position is clearly the spot they need to improve because, they were in for trying to trade for Brandon Ayuk. They almost got that done, but Ayuk ended up extending. They were rumored in some trades recently with DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, of course, even Deebo Samuel a little bit. So it's clearly been a position that they've identified as being weaker, you could say, even though, like I said, the offense is looking great with Russ. They the second half of the year is filled with teams like the Ravens, the Bengals, the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Commanders, even so, high-powered offenses, right? Teams that ideally, usually also score 30 points per game. So you have to be able to keep up with them. Maybe not necessarily the toughest defenses, because the Bengals defense really isn't ranked that high. The Ravens defense is pretty good against the run, but again, their passing defense isn't great. The Commanders defense has been playing better. The Chiefs defense is really good. Eagles defense is getting better, but their offenses are really what identifies each and every one of them. So the Steelers need to be able to match up well with them, because I think they're pretty confident in their defense. They're not really worried about that. They just can't find themselves in a spot where they're being outscored, right? If they could avoid it and trade for another wide receiver, they should go out and do it. And now during their bye week, they have all the time in the world to work those phones, talk to whoever they need to talk about, and try to get a receiver on this roster, because Van Jefferson, hasn't really been too involved. Calvin Austin is looking nice. George Pickens is looking a lot better with Russ, but it's not enough. You need a little bit more. So, according to NFL insider Tony Pauline, the Steelers have 3 names that they've identified that they could be going after in the last couple of days here before the trade deadline. And some of those names here I have up for you guys here. Just one second. Here they are. Tony Pauline said recently that now sources have attached the names of 3 receivers they will look to trade for. They include Darius Slayton of the New York Giants, Mike Williams of the New York Jets, and Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos. I am told the Steelers have a lot of interest in the Broncos wideout, but it is a matter of meeting Denver's asking price, which I'm told is high. So that's what Tony Pauline had to say on the matter. And looking at each one of those guys, right? We've talked about Mike Williams and how he would be an upgrade for this Steelers team, right? He would just definitely help out. A big body receiver, can be involved in blocking and whatnot. And it gives Russell Wilson the target, the catch radius that you would with a bigger receiver, right? George Pickens is one thing. If you can have another one of those guys, it would certainly help. So that makes sense. Mike Williams, actually Mike Williams, the situation on him depends a lot on tonight, because with him and the Jets playing tonight against a Texans team, you look at that situation with the Jets being 2-6 and how I pretty much said that their season is going to be done with if they go with 2-7. That would incentivize them probably to look for buyers for Mike Williams. If they're able to lose, they'll probably be in a spot where they also see their season not really coming to anything that they would have imagined. So it becomes more likely then that they're willing to sell. Rather than if they win, they might think, all right, we can turn this thing around. Let's keep everybody and see where we are. So tonight's game has a big emphasis on that and see where they are after that. We have also other reports coming from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler saying that the Steelers continue their interest on Mike Williams. Like I said, Mike Garafolo is another one that reported before that the Giants, in terms of Darius Slayton, would have to be blown away by a trade to move Slayton at this point in time. But also, again, that's one thing. But if the Giants were to lose, like we picked them to lose against the Commanders, they'll also be 2-7. So what good does keeping Darius Slayton do if, already it hasn't really worked out? Why wouldn't you try to get something back from him on the last year of his deal as well? Could be something that would become more incentivized if the Giants lose. So that's another thing. Elsewhere, on Courtland Sutton, you obviously have the familiarity there with Russell Wilson. Last year, while Russ was on the Broncos with Courtland Sutton, he threw Courtland Sutton 10 touchdowns last year. So that's exactly what the Steelers need, right? Converting in the red zone, having 2 guys like George, like Courtland, even Darnell Washington, Pat Freiermuth, all those guys in the red zone. You can only imagine what they could do with that. The catch radiuses for all those guys would be insane for someone as accurate as Russell Wilson. someone that can't necessarily run and get into the end zone himself. You need to increase that possibility of finding him weapons that could get open, and even when they're not open, you throw it to a specific spot that only they could get. It's going to be extremely challenging to stop that team. So I'm leaning towards Courtland Sutton. I would love Courtland Sutton to be on the Steelers. Having him and George is a thing of dreams as a Steelers fan. So it's also tricky though, because the Broncos we just mentioned as having a pretty decent season. They're 5-3 and they're in the playoffs right now, if I'm not mistaken. They have a playoff spot as things stand right now. So it would be pretty confusing and really not understandable why they would trade away their top target if they're 5-3 and really have a good shot of winning this year. It's hard to believe they would trade away Courtland Sutton. Therefore, Tony Pauline saying that the asking price is pretty high. But if the Ravens were to do the Steelers a favor, hand the Broncos a loss here, maybe it eases up that grip from the Broncos on Courtland Sutton. I'm really being optimistic about it because I would love, again, Courtland Sutton on the Steelers. But I think that one of the cheaper options like Mike Will or Darius Slayton are intriguing because Pittsburgh doesn't really have to commit to them long term. Both of them are on an expiring deal or just a 1-year deal with Mike Will and the Jets. So it's tough. Those are the three names. I assume one of them is going to be with the Steelers. Not knowing, but based on who their general manager is, the Steelers, Omar Khan, he's been pretty aggressive on improving this team and going out and getting players that they need. So I assume it's going to be one of these three guys. Courtland Sutton is the ideal scenario for the Chip Shot Football podcast, but realistically, it might end up being something like Darius Slayton because I feel like the Giants are going to lose, and that could be something that could be worked out in the end. Probably this deal wouldn't get done until Monday or Tuesday because the Steelers love to do everything last minute. So that's where my headspace is at. Very interesting report coming from Tony Pauline suggesting from his sources that the Steelers would also ideally like to have Courtland Sutton, but it is a tricky situation, right? A lot is going to be clearer after this week based on wins and losses, so we're going to stick to that and keep track of that as we go on through the weekend and into next week. But for right now, we're going to go to another quick break, and when we return, we're going to stick to talking about trades and look at a wider spectrum of 4 other teams along with the Pittsburgh Steelers that also need to make trades before the deadline to really go all in and give themselves the best chance of winning in 2024. That'll be coming up right after the break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Jumping back into the action here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast and taking a look more on some trade talk around the NFL now, not just focusing on the Steelers like we just did in the last segment, but broadening it out a little bit more to 4 other teams, 5 in total, at who I'm looking at as teams that absolutely need to look to make a trade to really cash in and really go all in on 2024 because they're in a spot where maybe we didn't expect them to be, or they're in a very good spot and I need them to stay there. I would like them to stay there, and I think trading would ensure that, or just they're almost there, but they need this trade, in my opinion, to kind of stay there and even get better. So the 5 teams that we're going to be looking at are the Arizona Cardinals, the Steelers, just piggybacking off of what we just talked about, the Lions, the Vikings, and the Los Angeles Chargers are 5 teams that I think need to absolutely make a trade because of those scenarios that I laid out before. we are only 5 days away from the trade deadline, and it's getting pretty tight near the top of the standings, in the middle, everybody jockeying for position. So you need to do something to kind of differentiate yourself from all these teams, right? You can't just stay put and think you have a decent enough team. If other teams are getting better, right, we've seen the Chiefs get better, and they're undefeated. We've seen the Bills go out and get Amari Cooper. The Jets, maybe they didn't get better, but they at least tried, and they went out and got Devontae Adams. The Chiefs also traded for a guy like Josh Uche. Teams that are really buying in, teams that are committed to winning, they're going out and doing something about it. So these teams also need to try and keep pace with it, because they're in situations where they potentially didn't expect to be, or they're right on the precipice of being very, very good. So one of those scenarios is the Arizona Cardinals, right? They're in first place right now in the NFC West at 4-4, technically, because they have the tiebreakers over the Seahawks and over the 49ers. So they're in first place right now. They're the 4th seed in the playoffs if that was to start today. So in a spot where probably not a lot of people thought they'd be, halfway through the year, you'd probably think the Cardinals are last, but they're first. So what do you do if you're the Cardinals, right? You're essentially almost playing with house money, right? Because nobody really thought you were going to be here, and you're still, I would imagine the Cardinals are saying that they're still way off from where their final product is, right? Because they have Jonathan Gannon, Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride. They have good pieces, but still a long ways away, I believe, and I'm pretty sure they would agree, from where they ideally want to be as a team, as a roster, and everything like that. But you're doing pretty well so far, and you've gotten help from other teams in your division, so it's working out right now, and why not try and cash in on that and try to get better? This defense, in my opinion, is the only side of the football that they need to look at, really, because the offense is looking pretty good, like I mentioned with those names before, and defensively, they rank 29th in pressure rate, 27th in sack rate so far through this half of the year. So maybe looking at someone like Chase Young on the Saints. The Saints are 2-6 and could be looking to sell some of their assets to gain some equity or gain some draft capital back if that intrigues them. The Cardinals going after a guy like Chase Young, they definitely need some pass rushing help, and Chase Young would certainly help out with that. Or maybe a guy like, maybe a couple people don't know the name, but Azeez Ojulari from the New York Giants. He has 6 sacks this year. He's in the final year of his contract with the Giants, and he's not necessarily a starter because it's usually Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns, but Kayvon Thibodeau is injured right now, so Ojulari's playing a lot more, and he's performing with this opportunity that has been given to him. So he's also in the final year of his contract. Why not try and talk with the Giants there? You're looking at a team that's 4-4. What would the Giants be willing to accept for trading away Azeez Ojulari, who again is in the final year of his contract, right? Why not get something for him over the risk of losing him for nothing? It could be 2 interesting options for the Cardinals. Also, their pass defense isn't great, so I don't know, maybe like Marshawn Lattimore could be something if they could agree with something with the Saints also. He has been in some trade rumors, and the Cardinals don't necessarily have a shutdown corner, so Lattimore would definitely be someone of interest, I would believe. But that's the Cardinals, right? We talked about the Steelers. They're first place in the AFC North, right in that sweet spot where you've done very well with the easy part of your schedule, right? You're 6-2. You'd ideally like to be better, right? Both games were decided by 3 points. So you could, in a different world, in a different universe, you could be undefeated right now. But that's not the case. And still, you've played pretty decently against these teams that I think most would say that the Steelers should be able to beat. So you're still, I think, a step or 2 away from really being competitive. So like we talked about, trading for a wide receiver, a Cortland Sutton, Darius Slayton, Mike Williams, could be something of interest, right? They're not playing this week, so they have a lot of time in their hands to try and address that position. Or a sneaky one would be defensive line, because their running game has been pretty permeable a little bit. They have been giving up some pretty big runs. So maybe someone like Adam Butler from the Las Vegas Raiders, the defensive tackle, could be someone that you could rotate in certain run-stopping situations where he could help out a lot to just plug up those holes. But really, wide receiver is what the Steelers need to be looking out for. Then the next three teams I have on here, one of them is the Detroit Lions, and I mentioned it a little bit before. The Lions, I've said, are the best team, in my opinion, in the NFL right now. But still, I believe they need a pass rusher. I believe they need someone to come and fill the gap for Aiden Hutchinson, because even though they're blowing teams out right now and it's all great, laughing, having fun on the sidelines, right? When you get to the playoffs, you're going to need someone to get to the quarterback. You're going to need someone to get to Jalen Hurts, to get to Brock Purdy, to get to Jordan Love. Anybody else I'm not mentioning. Matthew Stafford, guys like that. You need someone to be able to get to them. And in the playoffs, where everything's a lot tighter, there's more pressure, everything is amplified a little bit more. So not having a guy like that, I believe, would come back to bite them. So they're really good right now. That's really the only spot I would say that they need to go and try to find someone. And, they've been rumored with Zadarius Smith because of what the Browns are going through. Maybe Hassan Reddick if the Jets also lose. They haven't given him an extension, so why not explore that opportunity? Depending on what the Jets are gonna ask for, that would be something of interest for sure. But that's really what it is for the Lions. A pass rusher, certainly. And staying in that same division, the Minnesota Vikings, they're third in the NFC North right now at 5-2. After starting the year off so hot, they fell from first place all the way down to third place because of their pass defense. It's bottom 3 in the NFL right now. So with that in mind, I mentioned Marshawn Lattimore before. The Vikings were able to go out and get Stephon Gilmore. He's been pretty well for them. He's been doing pretty well for them. Maybe a guy like Greg Newsome with the Browns, again, trying to cash in on maybe some of their young players or just some of their assets in general. Why not just ask about Greg Newsome and see if he could come and help out their team? He's a pretty underrated corner as well. And he's been doing pretty well in Cleveland as well, alongside Denzel Ward. So while all the attention might go over to him because Denzel Ward is very good, he's been holding up his end of the deal. He's been playing very good, so why not explore that? Or from the Jacksonville Jaguars, why not Tyson Campbell? He's their best corner, but also they're not in a situation where they're really thinking about making the playoffs realistically. They're 2-6 also, I believe, so that could be something of interest for the Vikings to kind of poach away Tyson Campbell from the Jaguars. And lastly, an interesting one from a team that we mentioned on this list, the Arizona Cardinals. Maybe you could ask about Budda Baker to kind of pair him back there with Harrison Smith. Would be a great duo, but I don't think the Cardinals would really be willing to do that for someone in their conference. But, it doesn't hurt to ask. But really, Marshawn Lattimore, Greg Newsome, Tyson Campbell, I think would be great fits in a Brian Flores defense. And lastly here, we have the Los Angeles Chargers. They're in third place in the AFC West. They're the 7th seed in the playoffs right now, and they're 4-3. They're playing very solid, very well on-brand Harbaugh style football, running the ball, playing great defense, great offensive line, and pretty good defensive line as well. But I feel like they still need more on offense, right? You look at the game against the Chiefs. I believe it finished 17-10, and I believe that they just had some more offense to kind of threaten the Chiefs with a little bit. That game could have been a lot closer, and maybe the Chargers steal one there. Ladd McConkey is awesome. He looked very good in their last game, and I think, he's great. He's awesome and everything like that, but they're going to need a lot more to kind of improve this offense and make it a little bit more dynamic as well. Also, with teams like the Colts, the Bengals in 8th and 9th place in the AFC, they have great offenses as well. You look at Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, A.D. Mitchell, all for the Colts. And then you look at the Bengals, right? Joe Burrow, Jamar, T. Higgins. They have great offensive weapons as well. You don't want to be the Chargers and be forced to like not be able to go toe-to-toe with some of these teams. So you got to match the firepower at some point, right? And I know this year it was only the first year of Jim Harbaugh, but they're in a spot right now where they need to take advantage of it. So a guy like Mike Williams seems to be the ideal fit for me because of the familiarity and everything like that. He would come at a cheaper price also. But, any wide receiver would certainly benefit them. Darius. Cortland Sutton, I don't think they trade within the division. So someone like Darius Slayton, Mike Williams, I think would be ideal for the Chargers to go out and trade for. So those are the 5 teams I think need to make a trade, certainly, to try and take advantage of their opportunity, because all these teams share the same situation where they're in a spot where it's very good. The Cardinals 4-4, the Steelers 6-2, the Broncos in the playoffs, the Vikings, not falling off, but still need to keep pace with everybody else. So you don't want to be that team left behind. So I think making a trade would put these teams back squarely into the middle of that race here in the NFL, now that we're entering a very exciting, very pressure-full second half of the year in the NFL. So we have one more topic to talk about on today's show. We're going to talk about the Houston Texans and that injury to Stefon Diggs, because with everything that was going on, I forgot to talk about it. So we're going to mention it, give our thoughts on it, and whether or not the Texans could be in the market also for a wide receiver. Do we think that's necessary? We'll answer that question when we return just after this quick break. Thank you guys for joining me here, back on the show here for our last segment, and we're just going to go quickly through this Stefon Diggs injury, because I can't believe I just glazed over it because of how significant it was, right? Because currently the Texans sit as the number 2 seed in the AFC with a 6-2 record, and despite having their top wide receiver, Nico Collins, be on the IR, still they've been able, to win some games here, be in a lot of close games, and do a lot of their offense that they were planning on, even still without their top guy in Nico Collins, in large part because they still had Stefon Diggs, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, and Joe Mixon playing great. But now we got the unfortunate news back on Tuesday when they found out that Stefon Diggs, unfortunately, officially now, was going to be done for the season after suffering a torn ACL against the Indianapolis Colts in a non-contact injury. I believe, if I remember the play correctly, he was just running a route at some point in the game, and he went to plant with his right foot and try to cut inside. But once he did that, he kind of was hobbling on his right foot, couldn't really move too well, and then the training staff came on and everything like that, and he was able to walk off the field and everything. But yeah, the MRIs came back. He wasn't able to go back into the game, obviously, but they did some more tests on him, and yeah, it's official. He did tear his ACL, and now he is certainly out for the remainder of the year. And Diggs obviously was one of the blockbuster moves that we saw this offseason, right, during the summer, where he gets traded from Buffalo. He comes over to a new team, a new situation, and joining guys like Tank Dell, Nico Collins. This was the best trio of wide receivers, in my opinion, in the NFL, and they hit it right off, right from the start, right? Stephon was really molding in well with their offense, complementing Tank and Nico. They were all just, the offense was flowing very well, and then you add in Joe Mixon as well. They were in a great spot, but then Nico gets hurt, and now this seemed like a great opportunity for Steph, even more to kind of step into that number one role and really go out and prove that, he still got it, right? Obviously, with joining a new team and everything like that, and how everything ended in Buffalo, this could have been a great opportunity for him, but unfortunately, he goes down with this injury. And so far through the year, he's had 47 receptions, 496 yards, 3 touchdowns, and I thought he was doing especially good for CJ Stroud to have such a veteran, experienced, well decorated wide receiver for a young quarterback that, again, he's only in his second year, but the success that CJ had in his first year, there was already tons of expectations on him. So to have a guy like Steph in there and have success with his own young quarterback and develop that relationship, bringing everything that he learned from Josh Allen over to his relationship with CJ Stroud. Now, I know it's not going to be identical, but some of the things, some of the lessons, some of the relationship building lessons that Stephon Diggs built, he could have made the transition a lot more seamless with CJ, and it looked like it was going down that path, right? It looked like they had a good connection right from the start, but it sort of also softened the blow a little bit with the Nico injury, right? To have Stephon Diggs still and Tank Dell and whatnot. But now going forward, Houston will have to roll with, I say have to, like it's a downgrade. It is unfortunate that you lose Stephon Diggs, but you're going to get Nico Collins back eventually. Tank Dell, I mentioned when Nico got hurt, I thought that he was going to step up then and really go back to his rookie form, but that hasn't really worked out yet. So maybe now knowing that that Stephon Diggs is not coming back, this could really be the chance for Tank Dell to step in and have to step up, because Steph's not coming back, so they're going to need Nico with some other guy to step up for this passing game to really work. So there's that, but also they're going to look to guys like John Mechie, Xavier Hutchinson, Robert Woods, Steven Sims, guys like that to step up even more. And while it was unfortunate for the team for actually playing football that Stephon Diggs is going to be out for the remainder of 2024, but also personally, I didn't like seeing it because I felt like this was a chance for Stephon Diggs to prove everyone wrong, or to prove himself in a new environment, to kind of remind everybody that, it maybe just isn't about Josh. Like, he is truly one of the best wide receivers, and I wanted to see him, play the year out and see how far this Texans team would go. So there's that part of it, but also looking at this upcoming offseason with Stephon Diggs, he's going to be 31 years old, and because of the restructuring that the Texans and he did to his contract, it actually makes him a free agent this upcoming offseason, right? He isn't tied to the Texans after 2024, so he is going to be a free agent. The Texans could re-sign him, that's a possibility, but for a guy that was 31 years old, this was also a great opportunity for him to prove to a lot of teams that he could join a new organization, new scenario, and be just as successful into his 30s. But that gets a little bit complicated now because he is coming off of a severe knee injury. He's only played like about half of the year with the Texans, so we don't know how that's going to affect his market going forward. You'd imagine it takes a little bit of a hit just because he is, on the other side of 30 with an ACL injury. You can't imagine too many teams are going to be eager to bring him in, especially for the kind of contract that he's on and everything like that. So that's also the unfortunate part about it. So looking at my thoughts on this entire thing, it sucks for Stephon Diggs. It sucks for the Texans. But looking at the bigger picture for the Texans, does this take them out of a conference championship picture? Am I, freaking out that this season is going to fall apart for them? No. I would say from 1 to 10, I'm probably around a 5 right now. Mainly because I really believe in Tank Dell, and I've seen enough of Nico Collins already this year that if he wasn't hurt, he would probably be on his way to 1,000 yards already. He'd probably be very close to reaching the pace that he was on. But really, to me, it's about Joe Mixon, because he also suffered with a high ankle sprain, and he's been out for a couple weeks. And that really, to me, looking at Joe Mixon with the Texans and this Texans team without Joe Mixon, it looked very different. Like they weren't able to get into a groove, and I think Joe Mixon allows them to do that now. And with Stephon Diggs and this passing game taking a hit now, maybe I don't think it's crazy to think about a situation where if you're the Texans, maybe you become more run-oriented. Maybe you start building the offense around Joe Mixon, not so much necessarily getting to Steph, getting to Nico, getting to Tank, or now sticking with that and getting the ball to Tank, getting the ball to Nico. You want to sprinkle it in and spread the ball around, sure, but maybe become more run-heavy. Ideally, you'd like Dameon Pierce to come back to have both of them, but you mainly run it through the running game, right? Have Joe Mixon, have him, start the offense off, start the groove, start the rhythm through him in the beginning of the games, because their offensive line also hasn't really been great in pass protection, so throwing the ball doesn't necessarily make it better for the Texans to have more success. You have a great quarterback like CJ, but if the offensive line really isn't holding out, you don't want to maybe be in the worst case scenario where CJ gets hurt, right? That's the last thing you want. So because of that, because of the fact that you lose one of those monsters in your three-headed monster, why not look to Joe Mixon a lot more and start becoming a little bit more run-oriented, heavier sets, heavier formations with him and just two wide receivers out there? I don't think that's too crazy to say right now, because Joe Mixon has really hit the ground running with the Texans, so I wouldn't hate that idea either way. And also, what I will say too about this Texans team, their defense has been very good, but I think now it has to play a little bit better. The meter, the dial has been turned up a little bit more, maybe 1 or 2 levels up a little bit more for that defense, because they've been playing good, but I think now with the loss of Stephon Diggs, you're going to need to be a little bit more on your toes, a little bit more locked in to the fact that maybe we need to just be just holding teams off, bend but don't break. We don't have the luxury of having the endless amount of offensive weapons where we can score 35 points per game. We just lost one of those guys, right? So with our defense and now this offense losing one of its guys, maybe as a defense, let's hold teams to 20 points, to 18 points, around there, instead of giving up the 23, 24, knowing that our offense just lost a big piece. I think this defense is going to have to step up a little bit more and have a little bit more pressure, a little bit more on their plate, per se, than the offense, just to keep it balanced. So, lastly, on the term of trading for a wide receiver, I don't see them going out and getting a big name, but maybe a guy like KJ Osborne or Kendrick Bourne, who is coming off of a severe knee injury. He could be going for a low asking price. So maybe if they really believe after tonight's game that the wide receivers is not living up to what they thought, maybe you go out and get a cheaper guy like Kendrick or KJ, oddly enough, on the same team, or Darius Slayton perhaps. But I don't see them going after a big name like Cortland Sutton. So that'll all be predicated on tonight, how those young guys look and everything like that, and how this offense looks. So we'll see how everything rolls out. Everything is based on the game, so we're not going to have any more answers until after the weekend. So with that in mind, we're going to get to the Thursday night football game and end today's show. Thank you guys for joining me. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the Chip Shot Football Podcast, as well as following the network also on all forms of social media. And if you want to see more of the Chip Shot Football Podcast, go to both YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel, to catch more coverage around the NFL in a variety of different ways. And to catch more of the live shows, join me every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, each and every weekday, like I said, for more discussions, coverage, breaking news, whatever it is around the NFL, with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you for joining me again, and I'll see you guys back here again tomorrow to look towards the weekend and talk about what happened on Thursday Night Football.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit.